Hello and welcome back to Behind the Post. I'm Addie Peters, and today we're flipping the script. I'm going to be taking over as host today and interviewing your host, Olivia Messina. She needs no introduction, but I'll give her one anyways. Olivia is Oktopost social media and community manager. She's passionate about humanizing B2B brands, building communities, and developing her personal brand, all while being my boss. Olivia, I'm super excited to be here today. Are you ready to go behind the post with me?
Of course, and it feels so weird being asked that question because I'm usually the one asking it, but yes, let's do it.
That's amazing. I'm so excited. So, I brought you here today to get to know you a little bit more and ask you all the questions that I'm sure most of your listeners are dying to hear. So, let's get into it. So, by now, I'm sure that everyone listening knows that you used to be a teacher not too long ago.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure we all know why you made the career shift. You're amazing at what you do. But I just wanted to ask you, how has that career shift been? I know it's been about a year since you did that. So I just wanted to know how that's going and kind of what your outlook on that shift is today.
Yeah, of course. So I feel like for me, social media has been my life since as long as I can remember. So I was really ready to make that shift because I loved social media so much. I wasn't feeling super fulfilled in my role as a teacher, although I
Mhm.
love working with children. It was just really overwhelming, and I didn't feel like my creativity could really shine through. And I feel like my passions just aligned more with working in social media. So I was so ready to make that shift, but when I did transition, I truly thought it would be less taxing than being a teacher was, and I was so wrong. I feel
Yeah.
like I do just as much work, if not more work, which I was not expecting because being a teacher is really all consuming. I feel like I was
Mhm.
always thinking about my students, thinking about how they're doing at home, thinking about everything that goes into their individual lives. I was working with families. There was a lot of pressure from like school districts and state testing and all of those things. But social media, I feel like there's just as much going on, although I don't have the stress of working and impacting someone's life, which definitely
Mhm.
takes a lot of stress off, but it is
Mhm.
still so much work. And I feel like I am still working just as much as when I was a teacher because I would be in the classroom, come home, work on lesson
Mhm.
plans, get my stuff ready for the next day. I feel like I was always working, and the same kind of goes for social media. It never ends and never turns off. Even when
Mhm.
I'm not physically working, I'm still, even if I'm consuming social media, like in my personal life, I feel like I'm still kind of working because I'm still thinking about ideas, and so I feel like I never stop working, but yeah, that's the one thing that really surprised me. I thought it would be less, not less work, but I thought it would be less pressure and stress
Yeah.
mentally, which it definitely is to an extent, but one thing that really surprised me was how long posts take and how long the whole process and the things that I
Mhm.
was doing day in and day out as a social media manager just took longer than I expected. Although I
Mhm.
was already doing this, I was already working with brands and going over contracts and creating content and then sending it off for approval. I was already doing that kind of stuff, but
Mhm.
I feel like it is a lot different working in a B2B company. So that's one thing that really surprised me. And then
Mhm.
I would say one of the biggest challenges for me was getting to know a community that I didn't create. Now, this was hard for me because with my own community that I created on my own for my personal brand on Instagram, for example, I know my community inside and out. I built relationships and I just know them and I know the kind of content they want and I know the things that they're going through and I have those connections. We talk in the DMs. Like I feel like I have such a strong community on Instagram. And coming
Mhm.
into Octopost, I really found it hard to connect with a community that I didn't create because I wasn't there from the beginning. So that was definitely the biggest challenge for me is jumping into a brand community that when you weren't there from the inception. So that was definitely the hardest challenge for me by far.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting to hear you say that, like, being a teacher was 24/7 because we hear all the time that social media is 24/7. Like, you always have to be on. So it really just proves that you have such a passion for what you do and even what you used to do. So that's super interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So next question. This is super interesting to me, especially after jumping into writing content and working underneath you as a social media content specialist. How do you approach planning content and a new month as a social media manager?
So first, I think whenever I show someone my calendar for the month, like a previous month that has all the social posts in there, they're like, "How did you come up with all of this content? Like, where did you find all this? How did you know what to write? Like,
Hmm.
you did all of this?" And
Hmm.
I think from the outside looking in, it's like, "Oh my gosh, how did you like, what are you creating content about?" But
Hmm.
in the role, there's actually so much content and so many things going on that kind of fill up the month already. So
Yeah.
I have a doc that has all the key holidays and key dates like Mental Health Awareness Month, stuff like that. So I have a doc with holidays and things that we want to speak about. So when I approach a new month, I will go in and just put placeholders because I know I want to create content around that. And then we
Hmm.
also have certain content that reoccurs every single week. So I like to plan my content out weekly. I think it just helps me stay up to date with trends and things that are going on. If I were to plan out my content a month in advance, I feel like I would miss the mark on things and
Yeah.
stuff that we're talking about. Like we are in the social media industry. Social media moves very quickly when you're talking about anything, but especially social media news, updates, algorithms, things like that. It moves so quickly. So if we're not posting about that the day of or the week of or like a few days after, we're just going to be falling behind. So I like to approach my content weekly. So I create a content a week in advance. So that really helps me stay organized and stay up to date with trends and things that are going on. So weekly, we have certain content that will reoccur, like podcasts and things like that. And we also have webinars and events that are going on. So I will fill in that. And then I will fill in the rest of the content that aligns with our quarterly plans and the content focus that we have for that month. So I like to start with one LinkedIn post per day, and then I kind of build out the rest of the content around there. Obviously, you kind of tackle Twitter and Instagram for us, and I hold down LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. So I always start with a LinkedIn post first and then create content around that because that's our main network that we focus on. So that's kind of where I start.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you got me kind of on that same cycle of once that new month hits, like what's coming up, and also just having placeholders and knowing what is going to happen that week. And even just starting with like the longest form posts makes
Mhm.
creating content for other channels so much easier.
Yeah, and there is so much that's going on, and I feel like it's so easy to get behind, and then
Yeah.
a day comes and you're like, "Oh my gosh, today is World Happiness Day, and we
Yeah.
could have had a really cute post to go out around this and connect everyone, but we totally missed
Hmm.
it." So, I feel like that helps me really stay organized and not miss those key events and key dates.
No, that's so true. That's super smart. So, kind of transitioning into our next question. So, what do you think is the hardest part about being a global social media manager? So, Oktopost is super spread out with multiple varying cultures, lifestyles, and work weeks. So, how do you think that being a global social media manager has kind of tested your skill set so far?
So this is really a great question because I feel like there are so many challenges that come along with this role. So for me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the biggest challenge has to be reaching our target audience and providing them with engaging and meaningful content. There are so many things that go on behind the scenes before a post even gets published. There's planning, there's strategic thought, there's collaboration. And once that post goes live, I need it to do what I intend it to do. I need it to land with our target audience. And I also need them to engage with it. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's really challenging to create that meaningful content and have it be engaging and have your target audience engage with it. I feel like that's the one thing that keeps me up at night is how do I reach them? How do I make them engage? But how do I also provide value? And it's hard because you want to
Yeah.
have this huge social presence. You want to provide value. You want to be interesting, but you also want what you're doing on social to have an impact on the business. So I think it's balancing all of those things that
Yeah.
is really challenging for me.
Mhm.
Definitely, don't overthink it. Not every
Yeah.
single social post needs to be demand gen, needs to be creating community, needs to be tips and tricks. All of your social posts together will kind of help you achieve your goals at the end of the day. But sometimes I
Mhm.
get overwhelmed thinking, okay, how do I create a post that will get people to the website, that will get them to engage with our content, that will eventually lead them to fill out a form or sign up for a webinar? So it's definitely challenging. But when it comes to the global side of social media, I honestly think being a teacher has really helped me with this. I think the ability to take super technical topics and ideas and water them down so that a 5-year-old can understand them, that's something that
Mhm.
I was already doing as a teacher, and I think as social media managers, especially in tech or financial services or whatever industry you're in, on social media, you can't use that company jargon. That is not what's going to connect with someone at the end of the day,
Mhm.
and it's just not interesting. It's boring, and social media is not meant to be boring. It's meant to be social. It's meant to reach people, have people engage in conversations,
Mhm.
and super technical, jargony posts just aren't gonna perform well. So I think my background as a teacher, being able to take super challenging ideas or technical things that my students may not understand and being able to like break it down. I think knowing how to do that has really helped me as a social media manager.
Mhm.
And as for creating content for, a global brand, I think one thing that I learned very quickly is it is very important to write in a way that everyone can understand, even if they are not speaking your same language. There are things
Mhm.
that might be translated, and there's also things that people in different cultures or just different locations might not understand. For
Mhm.
example, I stray away from using any baseball references, like saying knock it out of the park, because not every single country plays baseball, so they're not gonna understand that reference. So that's something that I
Mhm.
really try to keep in mind. Um, and another thing that I think is really important that I learned very quickly is you always have to keep in mind where or who you're targeting with each message. For
Mhm.
example, like you said, we have different work weeks here at Oktopost. Our Israel team doesn't work on Fridays, that's their weekend. So if I'm creating a post that highlights Oktopost HQ and our Israel team, I'm not going to send that out on Friday because then they're not going to see it, they're not going to engage with it. So I always keep
Mhm.
in mind who I'm trying to reach, and then I will adjust accordingly to the time that I'm scheduling it to go live.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear, especially just about how your background as a teacher has helped you kind of develop as a social media manager and just be able to explain things in a simpler way. I think that has been what's made you such a critical part in teaching me everything about Octopost and just learning social media day by day. You are really, truly so good at teaching and making things easy to understand and short and sweet.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Okay, so leading into my next question, how do you approach social strategy? This is such a broad question, and I'm very interested to see how you're going to answer it.
Yeah, of course. So I honestly think first, don't overcomplicate it. I think when people say the word strategy, it seems really intimidating. It's just
Mhm.
another word for a plan. So you need an outline, you need to understand who you're trying to reach, what content you're going to share. So I think having a few content pillars really helps. So you know what you're going to talk about on social media. And then you just have to have goals that you're trying to reach. So why are you on social media? Your content is going to look very different if you're using your social as a demand generation channel or if you're using your social media to gain brand awareness or build community. The content is going to look different. So you really need to have your goals in place before you can create content around, because if you don't know who you're trying to reach or what you're trying to achieve, how do you know what content to create? So I think having those few things down will really help you. But I think at the end of the day, when I approach social strategy, I just try to remember that it is social media and it is meant to be social. It's meant to be lighthearted, and it's going to be the messaging and things like that are going to be different than your other marketing channels. So I think the most important thing is don't forget to be human. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you sound like a robot, it's just not going to work. No one is going to engage with it. and it's not going to land. You're not going to get the results that you want to see. And that's why brand pages just usually aren't as successful as personal pages because social is about emotional connection and building relationships. So I think that's where a lot of B2B brands really miss the mark. Their social media content is just so dry and they're not asking any questions and they're not engaging with their community and they're not leaning into brand storytelling that will make their audience connect with them or feel something. So I think really it's just have a plan, know who you're trying to reach, know your goals, have a few content pillars that you know you're going to create content around. And then when you're actually writing that content, just don't talk like a robot and really lean into that emotional side. I try to really create content as if I'm writing for my personal account. There are a few like tweaks, obviously, in like word tense and things like that, but I really just try to make it sound like it's coming from a person and not from like a logo.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I love what you say about kind of just don't overthink your social strategy. It can really be so impactful to just bring yourself back down to earth and realize that it is social and it's meant to be social and fun and create a community. So I love that you say that.
Mhm.
But leading into our next question, what do you do when you're feeling uninspired or in a rut creating content?
So I feel like this can happen a lot with being in a creative role. I feel like no one really talks about how challenging it is to work in a creative role where you need to show up and you have to be creative almost every single day. Because
Hmm.
if I'm being honest, I don't feel creative every single day. And some days it's really hard to show up when you're not in that creative mood or you just cannot get yourself to focus or you need to do another task that's not using your brain as much. So I feel like if anyone else feels like that, you're not alone. I feel like that's super, super normal. And every person that I talk to in a creative role feels the same way. So if I am not feeling inspired or if I'm in a creative rut, the first thing I like to do is take a break. So I'll either go for a walk or like scroll TikTok if I'm being honest, or I just go like fold laundry for a second. I just like walk away, or I do a task that isn't a creative task. Like I will go and do prospecting for my podcast. I'll go try to find some new guests or I will go through my email. So I do stuff that's not super creative. So it kind of takes away, like, you only have so much creative juice in a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just don't have it at all. So it's just knocking those tasks that you don't need to be creative for.
Hmm.
Another thing I like to do is I like to scroll LinkedIn. I have a few B2B brands that I absolutely love. So I honestly will go to their pages and I will look at what they're doing, the kind of language they're using, the kind of post styles they're creating, or I will just scroll my LinkedIn page, my home feed. I like to do that because I like to see what personal profiles are posting about. And I kind of get a lot of inspiration from that because I feel like today LinkedIn a lot of the posts that do really well are about people sharing stories or struggles or things that they're going through. So I
Hmm.
like to take inspiration from the posts that are landing really well on LinkedIn now from personal profiles because that's what's going to do well at the end of the day. So I try to take inspiration for that for our branded page. And then another thing that I'd like to do, and this is such a great tip, and I actually shared this tip on a Tip Tuesday video a while back, and that is sit in on meetings with your sales team, or like prospect calls or customer calls and see what they're talking about. This really helps me whenever I sit in on a sales call. I It is so helpful to hear what are the main challenges that our prospects are going through and
Hmm.
what solutions that I can help create content around. So that is like the biggest thing that has helped me whenever I feel like, okay, I need a post today, but I want it to be super valuable. Go right to the source. What are people struggling with? What do they need help with? You can
Hmm.
also just ask your sales team what kind of conversations you're having. If you don't have the time to sit in on a meeting, it's just a quick Slack message. Hey, like, what are people struggling with? What are your conversations around this week? What are the trends that you're seeing? What are the biggest challenges? So that really, really helps me. And I feel like that is something that everyone should be utilizing if you're not already doing that.
No, that is such a good tip. I recently just asked that question on or from our Twitter page, and we got a response that was super similar. It was just like having a conversation with our product team. It can truly be super inspiring. I know that even when we have our monthly meetings with product, it can be just super exciting to have conversations with people who aren't doing the same thing as you every day. Like when Olivia and I have conversations, yes, we inspire each other and we are super creative when we're able to bounce ideas off one another. But you can even take it another step further by speaking with other people in your organization who aren't in social and who aren't going to have the same kind of thought process around what you're currently doing.
Yeah, and I think so many times in creative roles or in any role in general, sometimes you get really focused on the tasks that you're doing and what you need to do for that week that you kind of forget who you're doing it for. So I
Yeah.
think my biggest tip, and I was talking about this on our last webinar, is don't forget who you're doing it for. Keep your eye on your target audience and keep them in mind in everything you're doing. Because I think sometimes we do get caught up in, okay, I need to fill the calendar, I need to get this many advocacy posts written, I need to do this, I need to do the reporting, that we forget, okay, who am I doing this for? Who am I trying to reach? What can I do? What can I say that's going to help them at the end of the day? So that's something that really helps me when I'm creating content. And I am in a lucky spot where I am our target audience, so that does also help. But I'm like, what content do I need to hear? What content would help me? I know
Mhm.
not everyone is lucky to be their target audience. I feel like that doesn't happen very often, but that that really helps me. It's just reminding me, who am I doing it for? Because we do forget sometimes just in the day-to-day tasks and trying to get everything done that we can forget that.
Yeah, I love that reminder. I really needed that today, if I'm being honest. So,
Same.
going into our final question, what is the part of your job that you get the most excited for?
So, hands down, it is engaging with our community. This is my favorite part of social, and it always has been. I remember when I first was starting out, like 6 years ago, getting comments on posts just lights me up. It makes me so excited. Getting DMs, like I love chatting with people. I love connecting with my audience, and I love creating community. I feel like there is nothing better than having a strong community and being able to feel it. So I love engaging with our audience. I love replying to comments is one of my favorite things to do. And whenever we do get really insightful comments or comments that are more conversational, I love that because that's just my favorite part of connecting with people. And, it's social media. It's meant to be social at the end of the day. So that is like the hands down the best part. And it can be challenging as like a B2B brand to get those comments.
Yeah.
People are more likely to engage with people, so it can be challenging because I wish we could get so many more, but I think that's where
Mhm.
employee advocacy really comes into play, so I just
Yeah.
love starting those conversations and really engaging with our community. It just makes me so happy.
No, I definitely agree. When I ever get a notification that someone's commenting, someone's replying, like I light up and I'm immediately excited to see what the conversation is and just what's going on around that post.
Yeah, because it means that you've done your job right, like,
Yeah.
it means that you created a piece of content that landed with someone and resonated and made them feel something to the point where
Mhm.
they feel compelled to say something back, and
Yeah.
that's every social media manager's dream. You want your content to land with people, and you want them to engage with it, and let me tell you, it's hard to do that, like, it really
Yeah.
is. So,
Mhm.
it's just the best part to see that, your post landed and it's doing well, so it's the
No,
best
you're
part.
so right. You're so right with that. Well, this was an amazing conversation, and I really learned so much more about you that I was really looking forward to. So, thank you so much for going behind the post with me, Olivia.
Yeah, thanks for hosting me. This was so fun, and I feel like we definitely need to do this again.
Yes, we do. See you soon.